ॐ नमो नारायणाय ॐ नमो नारायणाय
Asmadgurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Paramagurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Sarvagurubhyo Namaha. So we're continuing on with Agamas and South Indian Vaishnavism, chapter 10, Agamas as a way of life. So let's go straight to the text. Chapter 10, Agamas and the way of life. Every society has codes of ethics helpful to its well-being. The standards of good conduct and moral behavior enjoined by them vary from individual to individual and from one stratum of society to another. As such codes and standards among the Hindus derive from the Vedas, all such codes and standards among the Hindus derive from the Vedas. Okay, he's going to talk about Shmitis in the next paragraph. It's basically from the Shmitis, not necessarily from the Vedas. Moral goodness is a question of behavior. Everlasting happiness is the goal of good conduct. The law books or Shmitis and the conduct of those steeped in Vedic traditions are also authoritative. Moral behavior is alone held to contribute to individual progress and social welfare, being the progress of the whole of society. Mere knowledge, even if it be philosophical or theological, can lead to no certain goal. Okay, so that's debatable, all right? Because, people like Adi Shankaracharya will say, Gyanat Mokshaha, that from knowledge, liberation can come. But anyhow, here he's talking about social things, social systems. So the ethical codes are supported and stabilized by religious traditions. Hence the religious coloring given by Hindus even to secular activities. Just like Hindus make everything into a religious activity, like taking bath, for example, becomes a whole religious ritual, or even sleeping. The epics and the Puranas have played a significant role in fashioning moral concepts, particularly the Mahabharata, the Vishnu Dharmottara, which is a Purana, the Vishnu Purana, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Bhagavata, meaning the Bhagavad Purana. With the exception of the Gita, these texts reveal acquaintance with the Vyuha, the Vyuha system that we talked about in Pancharatra, right, of Chaturvyuha, Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Sadgunya aspects, the Sadgunya meaning the 6 qualities of the Lord, which are enumerated as Bhagas or Bhagawan. Bhagawan means one who has these Bhagas, or these 6 Sadgunyas, or 6 extremely important qualities of God. Virya, Tejas, Bala, Aishwarya, Jnana, and Shakti. Which are, so these Sadgunya aspects of God, which are vital to the Pancharatra. So these are basic concepts in Pancharatra. It's interesting that he mentions here the Gita doesn't sort of talk about that, but these other Puranas do. Okay, so the Mahabharata, and the Mahabharata, of course, which is an Itihasa. The influence of the Sattvata Dharma. Sattvata means sattvic, right? In the mode of goodness. Sattvata Dharma, or lifestyle, we can say, which is developed in the Mahabharata, may be traced to the books mentioned above. Again, Vishnu Purana, Vishnu Dharmottara, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavata, and Mahabharata. Still, the wide and varied aspects of Vaishnavism are so rich and complex as to deny any significant Agama influence on them. Okay. Dependence on God in leading a virtuous life is stressed in ancient works. Thus, no one has any real freedom. God, or Vishnu's will, creates, sustains the world and provides the people with security. Uttering his name, even lightheartedly, makes for happiness here and hereafter. No need to speak of devotion or dedication of all actions to of all actions to God bringing this about. God is the friend of all, high and low. Okay, so he says that in Bhagavad Gita, Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam. I'm the friend of all living beings in 6th chapter. So his devotees never suffer. I'm not sure if that's exactly true, but anyway, in absolute terms, they don't suffer because they're his devotees, they're his devotees, they're his surrendered souls to him, so they worship and serve him, so that in that sense they're not suffering. But in this material world, that's full of suffering. Okay, so devotion is of various kinds according to physical and mental capacities. Okay, so this, maybe he's going to talk about bhakti yoga here, and according to different qualifications, one can take to bhakti yoga or not take to bhakti yoga. I'm not sure. Its quality is determined by the spirit and not by pomp or show. Okay. The greatest of all activities is worship of God, and the adoration of his devotees is still more worthy. For God is more pleased when his devotees receive worship than when he does. Prapati, or surrender, is declared to be the surest means of attaining God. The Kalpa Sutras and Smritis, right? The Kalpa Sutras being the ritualistic parts of the Vedas, telling us how to use the Vedic mantras for different ceremonies, rituals, and the Smritis being the telling us about smarta rituals, right? That deal with the social and religious aspects of life, explain also how health and purity can be ensured. Bodhayana, very famous commentator, and others prescribe general rules for conduct and also give specific directions for the conduct of Vaishnavas and the worship of God. The Smritis of Manu, Shandilya, Vashishta, Vishnu, and others are similar. The Agamas' impact on Vaishnavism seems to have become significant only from the time of Ramanuja. The earlier attitudes may perhaps be due to the Brahma Sutra discussion on the validity of Pancharatra, which we talked about before, that Shankara and Bhaskara didn't find Pancharatra. They argued against it in their commentaries on Brahma Sutras. And the stand of Shankara and Bhaskara that this Agama is unacceptable, in part, and is unacceptable. In part, Yamuna's rejoinder eased the position. So Yamunacharya wrote Agama Pramanya, which helped to validate the Pancharatra and show that it's actually in accordance with the Veda and not against the Veda, not against the Vedanta. So after Ramanuja incorporated their doctrines in his Gadyatraya, okay, so he's saying that Ramanuja incorporated the doctrines from the Pancharatra in the Gadyatraya, in the Sharanagati Gadya, Sriranga Gadya, and Vaikuntha Gadya. They came to occupy a position of unquestioned authority. So Pancharatra is accepted because of the works of Yamunacharya and Ramanuja. But the Agamas have not influenced Vaishnava tradition to such an extent as to make it conform extensively to their ideals and practices. Okay, so there is a difference between the school of Pancharatra and Sri Vaishnavism, even though Sri Vaishnavism is, of course, very much influenced by the school of Pancharatra. Ramanuja also wrote the Nitya, which is a book of daily activities or daily worship. It's like an anikam for his followers on the way of worshiping God every day at home. It is based on the Pancharatra. Though the Vaikanasa also has prescribed a daily routine, it is intended only for the followers of the Vaikanasa Sutras. Hence, following the lines laid down by Ramanuja, his immediate disciples, Sri Vatsanka Mishra and Sri Ranganarayana, brought forth their own manuals. They were followed by Parasharabhatta, Nanjir, Narayana Muni, Vedanta Deshika, Varavara Muni, and others. Works on Arnika, right, daily activities of the Vaishnavas, were written by several later writers in later periods also. The fivefold division of daily routine, Panchakala Prakriya, forms the basis of these works. If we remember the 5 activities that we do every day: so Abhigamana, Upadana, Ija, Swadhyaya, and Yoga. So till recently, there were many Sri Vaishnavas who scrupulously followed out this routine every day, right? That is not the case now. The indispensable qualification for being a Vaishnava is wearing the Urdhva Pundram, right? The vertical tilak marking, Sri Tiruman and Sri Churnam. The marks which Hindu men and women wear on their foreheads are known as pundras. They may be vertical, Urdhva, horizontal, Tiryak, or circular, Vartula. The Vaishnava tradition enjoins the vertical variety on the authority of the Vedas, and he quotes here from Katashaka, cited in SR. I'm not sure what SR is. We have to look it up. Page 61. The Urdhva Pundra is claimed to keep away evil spirits. It must be worn to ensure purity while offering Sandhya prayers. So the Vedic and the Tantric Sandhya Vandanams, the chanting of the different Vedic mantras and Gayatri and other Pancharatric mantras, while doing Homa, while worshipping God, while studying the Vedas, and such other religious activities. Otherwise, they will be futile. Okay, so this is the idea, to impress upon people that they should wear the Urdhva Pundram. Right? Also, one of the 5 parts of the Panchasamskara ceremony that all initiated Vaishnavas go through. Tapa Pundra, second one. Tato Nama, Mantro Yagasya, Panchamaha. The material things for the Pundra, the material used for the Pundra is white mud. Sandal, it could also be sandalwood paste, and some other things recommended in different contexts are held to apply only to different persons. Okay, so the white mud is used. The other things like sandal and other things are used by other persons of other sects. But the Sri Vaishnavas use the white Tiruman clay. The white mud should be taken from only select spots like Sri Rangam, Venkatadri, Sri Mushnam, Tirunarayapuram, which means Melkote, Vrishabhadri, Tirumaliron Sholai, which is just near to Madurai, the temple of Sundaraja Perumal in Alagar Kovil. Banks of rivers, ant hills. These are all considered holy types of earth. The areas where Tulsi grows and holy places. The Urdhva Pundra has to start at the tip of the nose. Okay, so exactly what's the tip of the nose? Is the tip of the nose the end of the nose or this end of the nose? Which end is the tip? We don't know. Usually people say this is the tip of the nose, the bottom end. But we could say also it's where the bone ends, halfway down the nose, because we see many people, they end it there. Also, we have some people, the Wadagalais, who simply take the Urdhva Pundra from the middle of the forehead, which is the top part of the nose, the top end of the nose. So what exactly is meant by the tip of the nose is not exactly told here. And rise upward in parallel columns with some space in between them, where red or yellow vertical line in the middle space, right, with the help of a powder made of turmeric and other ingredients and called Sri Churna. So it's either, just like turmeric or it's red colored, like kumkum. Several opinions are recorded about the shape of the Urdhva Pundra Tila. It may be in the form of a flame, the leaf of the bamboo, a flower bud, and Vishnu's foot or feet, and so on. And each form is said to achieve a specific purpose, but the practice among Sri Vaishnavas is to have it in the form of the divine foot or feet. So you see however, the two sects, Vadagalai and Tengalai, have chosen to adopt slightly different forms of the pundra. Slightly different forms of the pundra. As a rule, red-colored churna is worn by both, but some of the former use yellow color. Some of the Vadagalais use yellow or just almost plain turmeric. Okay, so Vedanta Deshika discusses an interesting question about the form of the pundra. On the deities of God in the temples, the pundra is in the form of a flame. He says that the same form should not be used for men, for whom the form is that of Haripada, in the foot of the Lord or the feet of the Lord. If they try to imitate the Lord in this, will they seek to follow his example in other matters as well? That's the question. Right, so there's a passage here from SR. The number should be 12, including the one in the forehead. The others are to be put on specified parts of the body. There appears to be a somewhat weaker sanction for wearing only 4. So sometimes people talk about wearing 4. The Pancharatra enjoins the uttering of the 12 names of Vishnu when putting them on, while the Vaikhanasa prescribes specific mantras instead. Putting the Urdhva Pundra on the deities in the temples is authorized, as well as on wells, mandapas, means porches, pavilions, horses, elephants, and vehicles, on the instruments used for worship, flags, and other objects belonging to the temple. At the entrance to houses, the pundra used to be carved on doors or painted on a plank fixed to the top of the door. Here, there would be additional figures of the discus on the right and the conch on the left. Garuda to the right of the discus and Hanuman to the left of the conch. In modern days, the wearing of the Urdhva Pundra has practically disappeared among the younger generation. The practice of wearing the Urdhva Pundra seems to be very ancient. Vedanta Deshika, in his Sacharita Raksha, this SR may be Sacharita Raksha, okay, gives profuse citations from Vedic texts like Katha Shaka and Bodhayana Kalpasutras, Puranas like Matsya Purana, Brahmanda Purana, Markandeya Purana, Vashishta and Skanda Puranas, and Shmitis like Vishnu Shmiti and Shmiti Chandrika. The two Agamas also advocated it. So both Vaikhanasa and Pancharatra. Vedanta Deshika quotes from the Parameshvara, Paramesti, and Sanat Kumar Samhitas of the Pancharatra, though many passages cited from the Brahmaratra section of the last, that is the Sanat Kumar Samhita, mentioned text, are from 3 chapters which are now lost. The fivefold initiation, known as the Panchasamskara, which I was mentioning before, Tapa Pundra Nama Mantra Yagasya Panchamaha, is enjoined on all Sri Vaishnavas without distinction of caste or sex. This sacrament is intended to make one fit to discharge one's duties to God and man. It consists of Tapa, Pundra, Naman, Mantra, and Ija. It is also known as Samashrinam, or resorting to the preceptor as refuge. So usually they'll say Vadagalais will say it's resorting to the preceptor or the guru as refuge, and Tengalais will say it's property. It's resorting to God through the agency of the preceptor. So tapa, heating, refers to marking the left and right shoulder blades of the initiate with small heated pieces of metal in the form of the conch and discus, respectively. Vedanta Deshika quotes texts from the Vedas and the Pancharatra and the Puranas as authority for tapa, Two Vedic passages cited by him are given below. This is from Mahopanishad, also cited in SR, which is probably Sacharita Raksha. Those who have realized Brahman declare that the Brahman must bear the discus on his right arm and the conch on the left. The second passage is from Bhaskala Samhita, also given in Sacharita Raksha. O Vishnu, the learned have on the upper part of their arms the sanctifying conch and discus in order to cross over the ocean of worldly existence. Another Vedic text cited by Vedanta Deshika declares, he who bears on his body the mark of the heated discus of the omnipresent Vishnu, which gives security to the army of the gods, goes to the place which is devoid of misery, shaking off the sins, the place which the recluses who are without attachment attain. It is as follows. The word translated as on the body is vapusha, vapusa. The instrumental form of vapus, meaning body. There is nothing against taking it to mean the upper part of the right arm, which will be in consonance with other texts and Hori traditions. Those who do not have their bodies marked by the heated discus cannot exhaust the karmas, that is, the effects of their past actions, which condition is a necessary preliminary for salvation. Another Vedic passage testifies to ancient sages bearing on their bodies the marks of all divine weapons. There's another quotation from Bhaskala Samhita, mentioned in Sacharita Raksha. The marks or lingas, right, mentioned here refer to those of the discus, conch, mace, sword, and bow, the 5 weapons of Vishnu. They are believed to have been worn on the right and left forearms, right? So that would be the discus and conch, right? The forehead for the mace, I guess. The head for the sword, and the heart for the bow, respectively. Now only the first 2 are worn. Instead of marking the shoulders by tapa with the marks of discus and conch, mud and sandal paste are used for the purpose by Vaishnavas belonging to schools other than that of Ramanuja. It's not quite true because the Madhvas also use the heated brands. The scriptural text from the Rig Veda Kila section, Kila means appendix of the Rig Veda, mentioned the above states, Bibharti, Vapusha, Abhitapam. This clearly envisages tapa meaning heated branding. Obviously, the sacrament is intended to purify the human body and render it fit for service to God. Fire is regarded as a more effective purifier than water, particularly fire if the heated symbols of Vishnu, particularly fire in the heated symbols of Vishnu or his weapons. Such marks on the body render it fit for any religious act that the Vaishnava has to do for pleasing God. The Acharya officiating in this sacrament has been accused of cruelty. He hurts the body of the disciple only for a noble purpose. He must be likened to a surgeon who uses sharp instruments to operate on the patients. Parents again punish their children severely to induce them to be good, studious, and industrious. This is done out of love. Again, in certain regions, branding is a remedy for evil and the means of winning good luck. Certain diseases are treated in Saurashtra by branding with a hot iron rod below the affected part of the body. In Mithila, the mother-in-law and others apply. He's given a quote down here talking about how in the Vallabhacharya Sampradaya they use sandalwood paste instead of hot brands. And others apply the flame of a lamp to the knee of the newly wedded bride to ensure good fortune for her. Really? Okay, that's an interesting custom. Right. The law books of Vridaharita, Shandilya, and Vashishta and the Vishnu Damotra enjoin this practice. Shandilya says that one's utensils and cattle should be given the marks of the conch and discus. Children are to be adorned on the 5th day after birth with ornaments having the symbols of conch and discus. Those who oppose the sacrament of tapa rely on a passage in the Shrauta Sutra, which frowns on scars from wounds in the body caused in 3 ways. The 3 ways are taken to be through the bowstring, engaging in battles, or involvements in scuffles in gambling. Such activities must be regarded as forbidden or allowed only to the extent at which no scars are received or given. But they are claimed to refer to wearing the emblems of Brahma, Vishnu, and Rudra so as to cause scars. Such an interpretation is untenable. It goes against the authority of the Vedas, epics, Agamas, and the bulk of the Smritis. The few Smriti texts quoted above, the few Smriti texts quoted against the sacrament cannot avail against the formidable corpus of authority. It should be remembered that there are references also, as already mentioned, to the practice of wearing the emblems of all the 5 weapons of Vishnu, the conch, discus, mace, sword, and bow, to get freedom from samsara. There is no decisive evidence to show how old the ritual of tapa, as also the panchasamskara, generally is. It might have been originally intended as a protection against evil spirits. The newborn child used to be given a garland containing the emblems. Earrings in the form of the conch and discus used to be worn by the devotees of Vishnu. In course of time, probably by 700 AD, it became essential for a Vaishnava to have the samskara, that is the panchasamskara. In Nata Muni's days, it must have been in vogue, though not every Vaishnava of the times observed it. Wearing Urdhva Pundra might have become widespread earlier. After Nata Muni, tradition records some instances of tapa being administered. Tirumalai Nambi administered it to his 2 sons-in-law, and Periyanambi to Ramanuja. After Ramanuja, the sacrament of Panchasamskar became obligatory for all Sri Vaishnavas, irrespective of caste or sex. In a passage from the Mahabharata, quoted earlier in this book, it's declared that Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras can engage in the ritualistic worship of God if they are always devoted to their duties and are Krita Lakshanas, persons who have obtained marks of identity, that is, have undergone some kind of initiation. Attempts were made to interpret Lakshana as referring to the wearing of a sacred thread, Yagyopavita, by Brahmins, and the branding of the shoulder blades in the case of Sudras and women. This is untenable, as the word Lakshana, which qualifies jointly and simultaneously 4 or 5 groups of persons, is made to bear one meaning when applied to one group and another meaning when applied to another group. Though the Kalpa Sutras do not refer to the sacrament of tapa, there is Vedic sanction for Brahmins being marked by heated metal in the form of conch and discus on their arms. Though the sacrament of Panchasamskara makes men and women of all castes qualified to perform formal worship of the deities of God, not everyone can do so in the temple. The rite is restricted to those who get initiation. At home also, not all perform the worship. It is usually done by the eldest male member of the family. Though women are eligible, normally they do not do it, in spite of Tantrika mantras being available for them in place of Vedic mantras. Okay, so we have to understand also that the author of this book is, although he's talking about Pancharatra, he is still a Wadagalai, so he accepts that women shouldn't chant any Vedic mantras. Even the Astakshara shouldn't be chanted by women or Sudras with the Omkara in front of it. The 74 preceptors, or Acharya Purushas, also called Simhasanadipatis, or occupants of spiritual thrones, are said to have been entrusted by Ramanuja with the duty of administering the sacrament of Panchasamskara. The Yadiraj Vaibhava, 103, verse 103, and the Guru Paramparas refer to this, but there does not seem to be any written evidence to show that the right to give the fivefold initiation is restricted only to the 74 and their successors. So some very, very orthodox people will say that only the successors of the 74 lineages can give Panchasamskara and nobody else. But what he's saying here is there doesn't seem to be any actual evidence of that in scripture. As of today, only a few of the successors exercise this privilege, others having given it up for some reason or another. So the 74 lineages are not all available anymore. The ritual of initiation is begun by the Acharya himself with a homa or sacrificial fire. The Purusha Sukta, Sri Sukta, and other sacred texts are recited. Metallic representations of the conch and discus are bathed ceremonially and then heated in the fire. They're then applied by the Acharya to the shoulder blades of the disciple, who also is given the pundra, the Udva Pundra Tilak, in the 12 places. The teaching of the three mantras, the Mula mantra or Astakshara mantra, Om Namo Narayanaya, the Dvaya mantra, Shriman Narayana Charano Sharam Papadji Shrimati Narayanaya Namaha, and the Charma sloka, Bhagavad Gita, verse 66 of the 18th chapter, Savidamam Pritata, Mami Ekam Sharam Bhaja, Aham Tva Sarvapapebhyo Mokshishri Masuchaha, constitute the samskara of mantra. So we have tapa, pundra, and mantra. As for ija, the disciple is instructed in the ritual of worshipping God at home. He is then given a name by which he can regard himself as a devotee of God and his devotees. The occasion is utilized also to teach the disciple the significance of the epics, the Gita, and some other sacred texts, and instruct him how to lead his life as a Sri Vaishnava. The acharyas include some ascetics also. This has given rise to a practical difficulty. Sannyasins are prohibited from offering oblations in the fire. Hence, the homa required for the sacrament has to be performed by some grihasta attached to the sannyasin, who, however, applies the heated metal pieces to the shoulder blades of the initiates. For some time past, the tendency has been to seek initiation at the hands of sannyasins presiding over mutts, and the disciples of Acharya Purushas, who are householders, are dwindling. So we have these big mutt swamis, Jiya swamis, who have many thousands of disciples, and the Grihastha Acharya Purushas are less. At the same time, the sannyasis also, they have to hold the metal brands with some leaf or something. They can't directly touch the metal. Usually Sri Vaishnava sannyasis won't directly touch metal at all, because metal is made from the heating of iron or heating of some element, and therefore it's considered rajaguna. So it's considered to be in the mode of passion. So sannyasis who want to say in the mode of goodness, they don't touch metal things. One group of Vaishnavas, it may be noted, do not receive the Panchasamskara, and those are the Vaikanasins. The Vaikanasins claim that they are the children of the Lord and that they do not need the sacrament or preceptors. Other Vaishnavas are distinguished from non-Vaishnavas mentally, verbally, and physically. They engage in the distinctive mental activity of Bhuta Shuddhi, which is the mental regeneration or recreation of the physical body in a pure state, and the verbal activity of japa, or the chanting of repetition of mantras, in the Chakrabja Mandala, which is a geometric diagram on which the Lord is invoked in different forms and worshipped, according to the Agamas, specifically Padma Samhita, and are subjected to being marked on the body by the metallic emblems of the conch and discus of the Lord. The Vaikanasans reject the three mantras taught by other Vaishnavas by their preceptors. Japa in the Chakrabja Mandala is meant only for those who follow the Pancharatra exclusively, without reference to the Kalpa Sutras. As for Tapa, the Vaikanasans claim that in their families, the fetus in the womb gets the marks of the conch and discus in the 8th month of pregnancy of the mother, when the ritual of Vishnu Bali is performed. Narayana himself is said to give the marks to the fetus. Thus, the followers of the Vaikanasa Sutras claim to be Garbha Vaishnavas. So as soon as they're born, they're already Vaishnavas. And that is Vaishnavas even in the wombs of their mothers. In spite of these differences between the two Agamas, it may be noted that, according to both, the Vaishnava has to bear the marks of conch and discus. It should also be remembered that this samskara has for long been considered an essential qualification for conducting worship and preparing food both at home and in temples. Even women must be qualified before they can handle household vessels, bring water, or cook or serve food. The pious would not accept even a cup of water from one who has not undergone the samskara, though the strict observance of this rule is no longer common. The daily routine has been prescribed for the Vaishnava who has undergone Panchasamskara. An immediate disciple of Ramanuja, known as Vangi Vameshwara, and Sri Ranga Narayana Narya have written a manual, Anika Karika, based on Pancharatra Prakriya. It should be deemed an authentic account of Ramanuja's views. The round of daily religious exercises differs in some essential particulars in the Pancharatra and Vedic traditions. In the latter, that is the Vedic traditions, which enjoins Gayatri Japa 3 times a day, thrice a day, the Pancharatra prescribes the Japa of Vishnu mantras. During Japa, Vishnu is to be meditated as being present in the sun's disk, and he is to be worshipped with specific names. The mantra for the Japa in the morning is Vishnu Gayatri. Devata being Vishnu, at midday is the Dwadasakshara Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, invoking Mahavishnu. And in the evening is the Astakshara Om Namo Narayanaya, the deity being Sada Vishnu. Vedanta Deshika warns against hastily discarding Vedic practices and adopting in their place directions from Pancharatric texts, except on very strong grounds. He points out that followers of Ramanuja's teachings have performed marriages, upanayanam, and other sacraments and rituals in accordance with the sutras to which they owe allegiance. The particular Kalpa Sutras of particular branches of the Vedas that they belong to. Further, we know that Ramanuja's preceptors like Periyanambi perform sacrifices and other rituals according to their sutras. Hence, those intent on following the precepts and practices of Ramanuja and his disciples should not adopt for rituals and ceremonies the mantras enjoined in particular Pancharatra Samhitas. This is Vedanta Deshika's opinion. The Anika Karika enjoins Homa and other rituals of the kind mentioned in the Kalpa Sutras. In this context, the question arises as to accepting the Pancharatra injunctions above rituals involving the slaughter of about rituals involving the slaughter of animals, because there are many sacrifices where animals are sacrificed in the Vedas. King Uparichara Vasu is said to have offered a victim in a sacrifice, a figure of an animal made of flour or of wild grains. Brihaspati, the preceptor of the gods, accepted this view after initial opposition. The Pancharatra is held to be Vasu's authority. The Dvaitins, meaning the followers of Madhvacharya, influenced by humane considerateness of the Pancharatra, recommended sacrifices of this kind. The Vishishta Dvaitins, though far more influenced by the Pancharatra, argue that a Vedic ritual, if obligatory and required on specific occasions, must not be given up or modified. The offering of arghya to the sun during Sandhya prayers is cited as a ritual offering involving himsa, as it brings about the death of the demons impeding the progress of the sun. One has to turn around oneself in a clockwise direction to get rid of the sin of killing. But the killing of an animal as a victim in a sacrifice is not deemed a sin. Himsa, or causing injury, is an act which leads to evil. In this sense, there is no himsa in sacrifices, as the victims attain a better state after death. And there's a quote here from Ramanuja in the Sri Bhashya about that. Therefore, the ritual killing of animals is meritorious. It inflicts beneficial injury like surgery. This is also from Sri Bhashya commentary. So, yes, with the commentary of Vedanta Deshika called the Adhikarana Saravali. As regards the japa of any mantra, it can be verbal, silent, or mental. So it can be out loud so that other people can hear it, verbal, vachik. It can be silent in the sense it can be like murmuring or whispering, which is called japa or upamamsu. And it can be mental or manasik, completely within the mind without moving the lips or throat or tongue. Securing protection from evil spirits, accomplishing desired objects, and helping in the attainment of moksha, respectively. So what he's saying here, he's giving a quote here from Jayakya Samhita, chapter 14, verse 3 to 5, saying that these different forms of japa of the mantra do different things. If you chant it out loud, it gives you protection from evil spirits. If you whisper it, murmur it, it will help you get your desired objects. But if you want moksha or liberation, you should meditate upon it. It should be done in meditation. The rosary or Aksha Sutra, is to be used for counting the number of repetitions. Interruptions to japa are not generally permissible, but the arrival of a devotee of the Lord requires a break in it. Devotion to the devotees of God is stressed so much. Besides japa, 4 other rites are enjoined by the Pancharatra: sacrifice, libation, ritual bath, and offering of food to Brahmins. Collectively, the 5 are known as Purascharana. So Purascharana or Purascharya is what people do to get the perfection of a particular mantra. They are needed for securing full spiritual power through mantras. Among the prescribed mantras are the Vishnu Gayatri, the Savitri or the Savitri Gayatri mantra, the Sudarshana mantra, Bija mantra, Astra mantra, the Bhuta Shuddhi mantras, the Shakti mantra, and the Panchopanishad mantra, and Vaishnava mantras generally, and many others. Of these, only a few are used in japa and for attaining specific objectives. The Savitri is obligatory for everyone qualified to study the Vedas. Again, this will be emphasized more by the Vatagalays. Among the Vaishnava mantras, the Pranava, the Sadakshara, the Omkara or Sadakshara Om Namo Vishnave, Astakshara Om Namo Bhagavate, Om Namo Narayanaya, Dvadasakshara Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and Jitante, which remember was a stotra of 6 verses, but the first one is Jitante Pundari Kaksha Namaste Vishabhavana, Namaste Sturushi Kesha Mahapurusha Purvaja, are described as Vyapaka. So these Vyapaka Vaishnava mantras are considered the most important because they speak about the all-pervasive nature of God. It is the Astakshara or Om Namo Narayanaya is universally enjoined by Vaishnava tradition in addition to the Gayatri. Worship of God is obligatory for everyone. It is of 2 kinds, in the temple and in the home. The former is known as Parata Yajna, worship for the sake of others, and is concerned with the consecrated deities in the temple and intended for the welfare of the community. The Agamas, however, suggest that parartha means concerned with what is superior or excellent. It is like the sun, while worship at home is like the domestic lamp. It's also declared that parartha worship leads to final liberation. And this comes from a book called Archana Navanita. This is not to imply, however, that domestic worship or swarta yajna can be dispensed with. In temples regulated by the Vaikhanasa Agama, only the followers of the Vaikhanasa Kalpa Sutras can conduct worship, but in the temples adopting the Pancharatra Agamas, any Vaishnava Brahmin knowing any Kalpa Sutra can perform the Aradhana. But the primary eligibility is said to be with those who are descendants of the Brahmins who were taught the doctrines of God, by God, and whose families have been attending the worship in the temples. Special initiation is necessary for these, as well as others who have only secondary eligibility. Men and women of all castes can and must worship God at home after receiving Panchasamskar. Worship at home is conducted with reference to one or more small icons and to a stone called salagrama, in which the Lord is believed to be specially present. The latter is preferred as the worship of the icons at home requires time and involves strain. Household icons should be made of metals like silver or copper, or of certain other specified materials. They should be not less than 6 inches in height. They require formal consecration. The salagrama is found in the river Gandaki when it flows through Nepal. As shala means a kind of fish and grama, a dwelling place, the compound word means the place where the shala kind of fish reside. And this is coming from Banuji's commentary on Amarakosh, which is called Namalingana of Amara, 2:37. But the exact significance of this name is not known, and it is sometimes written as Shaligrama instead of Shalagrama. It is to be treated as Swayam Vyakta, or self-manifesting, the deity of Vishnu. According to a traditional account, the river Gandaki cursed the gods, who in turn cursed it to become a black, dull stream. Lord Vishnu reconciled the two by decreeing that 2 Brahmins, Graha and Matanga, should come to the river on account of a curse and die there, after which they would get moksha. Insects born out of their marrow and fat would convert the water into vajra. Vajra means thunderbolt. Thunderbolt like hard stones, thus redeeming the river from the curse. These are the salagrama stones. They are distinctive in having one of the marks of Vishnu's discus, club, conch, and other weapons. And that's a quotation from Ranavira Bhakti Ratnakara. Never heard of that shastra. The marks may be visible or subtle. From the nature and shapes of these marks, they are identified as Varaha, Matsya, and other forms of God. For instance, the Varaha Shalagrama is said to be Gonakriti, meaning while the Matsya is thus described. And he gives a quotation. As Vishnu is ever present there, no pratishta or consecrated installation is necessary. The donor of the salagrama will get happiness and prosperity. A lot of times during a Sri Vaishnava wedding, one of the parents will give of the bride, or the groom will give a shalagrama to the bride or groom to worship in their new household. For worship in the house, a group of 5 or 6 shalagramas called a chetra is recommended. And other people will say that a chetra is 12 and that 144 is a dharma or something like that. This, depending on different numbers, are recommended. Perhaps this is meant to be similar to the number of bearers in temples. Okay, 5 or 6, right. Shalagram worship is similar to that of temple icons. The object of worship at home with a shalagrama or icon may be inherited, purva purusha stapita, acquired from select spots, swayam grihita, installed by someone in one's house, anya nyasta, or purchased krita. In the Vaishnava idea of God, many currents of thought about man, God, man, the world, and their interactions meet and mingle. Important contributions were made by the epics, Puranas, and poems of the Alvars. Even before Ramanuja, Vaishnavism had gained a distinct form. During and after his times, when the temple became very important, the influence of the Agamas began to be increasingly felt, but it never became all comprehensive. Worship of God is also called aradhana, which means an act of pleasing. The Vaishnavas expect people to be paramaikantins, those who realize that they're entirely dependent on God and therefore have no favor to ask. The descriptive term is understood in two ways. Those who have decisive knowledge, anta, only, eka, about God, parama, as the means and the goal, those who are great, parama, in having decisive knowledge, ekanta, about God, as the means and the goal. They have no other purpose to be served, seek no other God, or resort to no other means. Every Vaishnava is expected to take a resolve or sankalpa or vow to please God, who is Bhagavan, is possessed of 6 auspicious qualities, and is Narayana. Some resolve to do things which are kainkarya. So kainkarya meaning service. The procedure for worship at home is detailed in Ramanuja's Nitya, which seems to be taken from the Lakshmi Tantra and the Ahirbunya Samhita. The instructions regarding Buddha Shuddhi, Panchopanishad mantras, Shurabhi Mudra, Astra mantra, for keeping the offering secure, and such other things given in the Nitya are taken from the Pancharatra, the influence of which is also seen in performing Hrid Yaga, meaning or Manasa Yaga, or mental worship in the heart, before performing the external worship. The recitation, however, of the compositions of the Alvars and Acharyas during the ritual of mantra pushpam, right, offering of flowers, mantras, and Shatamurai, which is at the end of the 5th part, the Punamantrasana part of the Tiruvaradhana, has no precedent in the Agamas. The Nitya of Ramanuja and the Anika Karika of his disciple, Vangi Vamsheshvara, mention dance and vocal and instrumental music as part of the formal worship, and direct the offering of flowers at the utterance of each of the Vyapaka mantras and of each rik of the Purusha Sukta. But they do not refer to the mantra Pushpa and Shatamurai. The Abhigamana Sara of Srivatsankam Mishra, the Nityas of Parasara Bhatta and Nanjir, the Nitya Karma Sangraha of Gridhra Saramuni, and the manual of Krishnamuni are lost. We cannot find out when or how the procedure now followed in the Aradhana Krama was fixed. In regard to these and many other practices in Vaishnavism in relation to the worship of the Lord, pious persons have received them from tradition dating back to very early times, though they may not be based on Dharmashastras or Agamas, but they spring from one source of Dharma, the good conduct of good persons. Some of these practices may be mentioned. While most people prostrate only once, Vaishnavas of the Vadagalai sect do it twice or 4 times. Usually we see them do it 4 times. not twice. That is an even number of times. The temples, one should worship at the shrine of Sri before proceeding to the shrine of the Lord. One can have a special worship called archana through the archika or officiating priest. It consists of offering a specific number, usually 108 or 1008, saffron powder, kumkuma, at the feet of the Dhruva bearer or the fixed murti of Sri, and tulsi leaves at the feet of the Dhruva bearer of the Lord, to the accompaniment of the uttering of their numerous names, 108 selected names, or 1008 such names. The list of names is known as the Namavali, and it is available not merely for Sri and Vishnu, but also for incarnations like Rama, Krishna, and Narasimha. Of the 108 names of Sri is Prakriti, and obviously it indicates the influence of Agama philosophy. Each name is recited like a mantra with the pranava at the beginning. The noun is declined in the dative case, and the word namaha, or prostration, comes after it. So, for example, Om Keshava Namaha. The flowers, leaves, and kumkum offered during Archana is at the feet of the icon. Fruits, coconut, betel leaves with areca nuts are then held before the deity for acceptance. Burning camphor is waved 3 times from foot to the head of the deity, evidently in order to enable the worshippers to get a good view and to give them the assurance of divine blessing. But the archana is also part of the temple routine, which includes the offering of water for arghya, washing the hands, padya, washing the feet, achramaniya, sipping, and other upacharas, and the use of water in bathing the icons. As such, water acquires sanctity and is distributed to the worshippers after it becomes available for them to sip. The satari, which contains representation in metal of the 2 feet or the 2 shoes of the Lord, is then placed on the head of the devotees in token of divine acceptance of their services and devotion. The flowers and tulsi leaves used for archana are also distributed to the devotees. Other features of temple worship, like special offerings or periodic abhishekams, ceremonial baths, can be offered to particular deities on behalf of the devotees at their request, as in the case of archana. It is enjoined that worshippers at the shrine should stand to the right of the deity, but the direction is not observed. Another injunction not followed is that the worshippers should leave the shrine walking backwards without turning their backs on the deity. The prescribed circumambulation of the shrines, however, is carried out. The name of Sri Shrine is Tayar Sannidhi in Tamil, which indicates that she is the universal mother. Taya means mother. The word, it's interesting because Lakshmi is usually called Taya, whereas Devi or Parvati, right, or any other goddess is called Nachya, or is simply called Amma, mother, another word for mother. Indeed, the entire temple is permeated in a special way by the divine presence. The mandate is therefore given that after passing the Dwaja Stamba, the flagpole, ceremonial flagpole in the temple, one should not bow or prostrate to any other than the deity, not even to kings and preceptors. At the time of festivals and processions of the deity, every individual must try to render some kind of service. This takes precedence over all other work, including the performance of Sandhya Vandana, which should be postponed, if due, when the processional icon is taken out. Similarly, the general rule that silence be observed during the Mahapradosha, the evening time, right? That is the evening, having the Trayodasi Tithi, is not to be followed by those who have to render Vachika Kainkarya, or verbal service, by reciting the Divya Prabandhas or the Vedas. The code of behavior has been clearly inspired by the sense of a primary obligation to render service to the archer form of God, deeming it more important than any other duty whatsoever. The concept of service has influenced even the choice of the terms to describe the worship of God. Those who carry out formal worship are said to do aradhana, an act which pleases, and visiting the temple is taken to provide on occasion for seva service, an occasion for seva service. Philosophically, the self is regarded as a shesha, or subordinate to the Lord, and hence a servant, sevaka or kinkara, to him. What he does is kainkarya, or service. The special attitude is extended to characterize his relations with his preceptor, parents, elders, relatives, and other Vaishnavas. In all these cases, he is said to render seva, which he shows his when he shows his regard and respect, and even prostrates himself. So not only before God, but also before all of these relatives and teachers and things. Festivals in the temple are deemed occasions of celebration at home, where feasts are prepared. Some arrange for public feeding on a large scale on such occasions. Contributions are given for conducting specific festivals in temples when food preparations on a large scale are offered to God and distributed to the devotees. Gifts in cash and kind are also given to the archakas, or the temple priests, and others rendering service in the temples. Some persons create endowments out of money, landed property, etc., to yield income for conducting the temple festivals in which they're interested. Money is poured every day into the hundis, which are the collection boxes, in temples. The vast daily collections in the Tirumala temple of Lord Venkateshwara, of which the annual income runs into several crores, which means crores are tens of millions of rupees, right? From voluntary contributions, serve as a correct index of the fervent devotion of the people. The epics and Puranas, no doubt, have nurtured this devotion, but it is the Agamas that have played a notable role in directing this devotion in temples. The daily routine, the official and private offerings, and the festivals at temples are governed by the Agamas. The study of South Indian temples, particularly that at Sri Rangam, reveals the Agama influence on the temples and society. As regards to domestic worship, it has to be offered twice, in regards to domestic worship, meaning in the house, it has to be offered twice every day, whether to a consecrated icon or a shalagram, but it is usually performed only once in the morning. The procedure is the same in the case of both an icon or a shalagram, except that when you have a deity, you have to, or an icon, you have to do a vahanam, and the shalagram, there's no vahanam is necessary. If for unavoidable reasons aradhana should not be carried out, at least the food prepared at home should be formally offered to the deity. This can be done even by ladies. It is also usual for a small lamp fed by ghee or oil to be kept near the domestic shrine and lighted both in the morning and the evening, and kept burning for some time. After the conclusion of the worship, holy water is first taken by the person who did the aradhana and then distributed by him to others. In one detail connected with the worship, members of the Tengalai sect, except for a few in Andhra, differ from others. They do not ring the bell during home aradhana, Tiruvaradhana. Sometimes this is explained as due to the fact that the person doing the aradhana has to use his left hand to ring the bell, as the right hand has to make offerings. Usually, achmana, ceremonial sipping of water, has to be performed at the commencement of a religious act. This is forbidden before and after the taking of holy water. So achmana is forbidden before or after you take the holy tirtha or charanamrita water of the deity. So this is quoted in a section called Achmana Nirnaya, which talks about Achmana in PR, which will be probably Pancharacha Raksha, which we're studying at the moment. Bhaivedanta Deshika. Another prohibition in this regard to accepting food from the house where Vishnu is not worshipped in Archa form, also cited in Pancharatra Raksha, page 115. It is mandatory to take only the food offering offered to God during the Aradhana. Accepting such food is called anuyaga. Anu means small, yaga means a sacrifice. So it's a method of doing sacrifice, taking food. As it is an act of pleasing to God, being regarded as part of worship and carried out while thinking about him. Except recluses, all are to take food twice a day. So this was the old system. There was no breakfast. There was a brunch type meal. The main meal of the day was around between 12:30 and 10:30 and 12 o'clock, and then there was a later afternoon or evening meal. So just 2 meals a day. So, and he's saying except for recluses or sannyasis might eat just only once a day. In regard to parisechana is the sprinkling of water around, usually around the leaf when you're going to eat, as in Brahmana Bhojana, or it could be any other sort of sprinkling of water. The ceremonial sprinkling of water around the dining leaf, followed by taking a small quantity of water from the palm of the right hand to the accompaniment of uttering a mantra. It's enjoined in some texts that it is only for the cooked rice. This means that other dishes like soup or vegetables are to be served afterwards. This practice is now prevalent only among the Vadagalai Vaishnavas. I don't know why he says that. Everybody that I've seen has been doing parisechanam like that, and they do it only when there's rice, whole rice there. The Vaikanasins do not follow it at the present time. That's interesting. After the parisechana, the holy water used in worship, adhava, is to be taken. This is also done at the end, but this has not been prescribed. But it is there in the Brahma Bhojana, so everybody's doing it, taking water at the end after they take. So, interesting. In the fivefold division of duties according to time, those swadhyaya meaning study, or it could also be the teaching portion of the day if you have students, right? And yoga finds a place. They're not practiced even by the extremely pious nowadays. The Agamas deal with some festivals which recur annually. The Vaishnavas in course of time have concentrated their devotion on Vishnu to the exclusion of other deities like Shiva, Ganesh, Subramanya, Indra, and Surya. The Agamas, however, provide for their worship as gods forming Vishnu's retinue. In fact, the worship of Ganesh is enjoined before starting any ritual, but the Paramaikantin ideal of devotion, developed under the influence of the Gita and the Puranas, did not allow consideration for other deities. Thus, the Vaishnavas do not observe Vinayaka Chaturthi, right, Ganesh Chaturthi, Skanda Shastri, or Shivaratri, nor do they visit temples of these deities. The birthdays of the Alwars gained importance among them. Every Vaishnava household celebrates the nativity of Andal, right, her birth star, on Tiruvadi Puram day, right? So we have a Tamil month, solar month called Adi, and we have a star called Puram. So we call it Tiruvadi Puram, which is the day of the birthday of Andal. When the moon is in the asterisms of Purva Palguni. Some Vaishnava festivals like Sri Ramanavami, Sri Jayanti, meaning Krishna Janmastami, and Narasimha Jayanti are celebrated by all Hindus. The Agamas deal in detail with these 3 celebrations. There are differences among the Vaishnavas in fixing the days of these festivities, and in some minor details of observance. Sri Krishna is said to have been born under the asterism Rohini during the night of the 8th day of the dark fortnight in Shravana month. This is a Sri Jayanti day, and the Astami and Rohini, when the Astami and Rohini asterism do not occur on the same day every year, or extend simultaneously through their duration, usually the Tithi and the Nakshatra are simultaneous only for a few hours. The Astami may extend for the whole day, with Rohini occupying a part of it, or vice versa. In the former case, we have Janmashtami, while in the latter case gives rise to what's called Sri Jayanti. The Kritika constellation, or the Saptami, the seventh lunar tithi, may extend for some time with the Rohini and Astami respectively. Or Rohini and Astami may be together when the moon rises in the dead of night, meaning at midnight. On the day, or the day may be such that Rohini prevails at midnight without having had any association with Kritika earlier, though the Astami could have come after sunrise when Saptami was still continuing. Or again, the Astami could prevail without any tinge of Saptami during the day, though Kritika would have preceded Rohini in the earlier part of the day. Any one of these combinations of these conditions permits the celebration of Krishna's birthday. According to the Muni Traya section of the Vadagalai Vaishnavas, right? According to them, right? So Muni Traya means Hobala Mat, the two Andavan months. This is called Muni Traya Sampradaya. And it means, the Muni Traya means three Munis, means Nata Muni, Yamuna Muni, and Ramanuja Muni, which of course are worshipped also by other Sri Vaishnavas, Tengalais, and Vadagalais, but a specific section is called the Muni Traya Sampradaya. The Vaikanasans, right, stress the appearance of Astami at sunrise, while whether or not Kritika is there at that time to be followed by Rohini later in the day. But many Vaishnavas prefer Rohini at sunrise, even if the Tithi should happen to be Navami or Dasami. Okay, so there's some difference of opinion here. But most Vaishnavas of the Vadagalai sect and the Tengalai Vaishnavas follow the Pancharatra in this matter. On the Sri Jayanti day, they fast during the day and eat at night after celebrating the birth of Krishna. Pancharatra dictates regarding Tithi and constellations are followed in celebrating the Srinaram Navami, Ramanavami, Narasimha Jayanti, Kritika Deepam, Shravana Dwadasi, and other festivals. It's said that a pious and learned scholar of Kanchi during the last century adopted Pancharatra rules completely to the exclusion of the duties, the regulations of the Smritis, and wrote an Anika, or manual of daily duties, settling out his views. But the limited extent of the Pancharatra influence on Vaishnavism is reflected in a section of the Muni Traya group among the Vadagalai sect adopting Smriti rules for observing the Sri Jayanti. They fast throughout, taking the meal only the next morning. So we see here again the Muni Traya group of Vaishnavas, they're more, being Vadagalais, they're more prone to follow the Smriti rules rather than the rules of the Pancharatra.
Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya.